Cross, put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now, coming you at a special time, 10 a.m. Eastern today, to preview Feast Week, one of the best college basketball weeks of the year. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, want you to get into the chat, want you to like and subscribe on YouTube. We want 250 likes on this show because it's Feast Week and we have a major appetite to set the table for everything you are going to watch this week in college basketball. And also a special programming reminder. We are doing the show today at 10 a.m. Eastern because I did not want to interfere with Feast Week, with the games getting going in Maui and at the Players Era Festival. But a reminder, every Monday and Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season, we will be coming to you live at 1 p.m. Eastern. So make sure that you're in a situation where you can absorb and participate in the live show. And if you can't, we want you to subscribe on Apple and Spotify, but we need an army with us as we build this product here on Inside College Basketball Now. We need you to be all you can be. And we're going to need college basketball again starting today to be as electric as it's been the first 3 weeks of the season. It was a quiet weekend in college basketball, not that many games of significance. Really good win for Butler over Virginia on CBS Sports Network on Sunday. Really nice win by Jared Calhoun in Utah State in Charleston on Sunday. Clemson also won a game against Georgia, but it feels like we're building up. It feels like we are now starting to get into the games that are going to determine where teams are able to make the NCAA tournament and also teams that are able to project a certain seed in the NCAA tournament. This is Feast Week, and it's a special edition of Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein at a special time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And with that, we get the three big things. And the first big thing is not directly related to Feast Week, but it's directly related to the number one team in college basketball, according to my rankings, and that's the Purdue Boilermakers, a team that beat Texas Tech, a respective last week top 15 team, by 30 in the championship game in Baha Mar on Friday. And I got to thinking, after watching Purdue dominate the Red Raiders from tip to finish on Friday night, how long could this run last for Purdue? How long could Purdue continue to dominate its opponents? Now, with that said, this is college basketball, and we saw the night before Memphis, a team that is now 1-4, take Purdue to the wire in Baha Mar and be really competitive. But I started to look at Purdue's schedule, and I started to break everything down when you take into account the lack of travel that Purdue is going to have between now and when the calendar flips into 2026. And I got to thinking about the advantages that Purdue will have by playing so many games inside the state of Indiana. And I think there is a real chance, a better than likely chance, that Purdue will go 13-0 into 2026, into a January 3rd meeting against Wisconsin. If you're watching on YouTube, look at the schedule right there. The next game for Purdue is a bye game against Eastern Illinois. Then Big Ten play starts for the Boilers. There is a road game against Rutgers in Piscataway. Keep in mind, this is a Rutgers team that lost a bye game to Central Connecticut last week. I don't see this Rutgers team beating Purdue at home, regardless of how much the rack, and it will always be the rack, plays a factor. Then on CBS, December 6th, you have the biggest roadblock, in my opinion, Iowa State at Mackey Arena. Now, Iowa State is a very capable team. TJ Altenberg has done a great job. Iowa State going to play St. John's later today in the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas. But I am still not sure if Iowa State has the requisites to go to Mackey Arena and win that game. And then look at what's after that. Minnesota at Mackey Arena, Purdue's not losing that game. Marquette, this Marquette team at Mackey Arena, Marquette already has 3 losses on the season. Marquette's not going to Mackey Arena and winning. Auburn at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Stephen Pearl, coached a great game against Houston a couple of weeks ago, is going to coach a couple more big games this week in Vegas, but I don't see Auburn going to Indianapolis and beating Purdue. And then you have a bye game against Kent State. If Purdue can get through Iowa State on December the 6th, I think there is a real chance that the Boilermakers are going to go into 2026 with a 13-0 record going into that Saturday game on January 3rd against Wisconsin. It is all in front of Purdue. And if you're Purdue right now and you're thinking about the big picture, and I've talked about this with Matt Painter and I've talked about this on the show, it's really difficult when you are a team that knows your fate is going to be determined in the NCAA tournament and you bring such a large percentage of your team back, to have the mental stamina to understand you are not going to begin the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed in the Midwest region. But that's what Purdue is working towards. And the geographic locations of the NCAA tournament play a major role in whether or not a team is able to accomplish its goals. And I'll tell you right now why the Midwest region and being the 1 seed is so important for Purdue. If Purdue were to get the number 1 seed in the Midwest region, and if Purdue were to play at the United Center in Chicago for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, that is only 124 miles from Mackey Arena. That gives Purdue an incredible opportunity and an incredible advantage to go back to the Final Four for the second time in 3 years. And as we know, the Final Four this year is at Lucas Oil Stadium. And look, another thing we have to look at in this climate with this Purdue team, it is extremely rare what's going on with Purdue in terms of the level of retention that Matt Painter has achieved with this basketball team. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn weren't just starters on the team that went to the national title game and lost to UConn in 2024. They all have not played for another program in college basketball. That is very unique. Trey Kaufman-Renn, keep in mind, redshirted and has spent 5 years with the Boilermakers. I remember being at a Purdue practice, prior to the 21-22 season, and I said to Matt Painter, "Who's that?" And I pointed at Trey Kaufman-Renn. He says, "It's Trey Kaufman-Renn. He's going to be really good for us, but I'm going to redshirt him because I have Mason Gillis, Zach Edey, and Travion Williams." And now Trey Kaufman-Renn is having a first-team All-American caliber season. He's rebounding the ball better than he ever has. Trey Kaufman-Renn, and nobody's really talking about this, is getting approximately 5 rebounds more per game than he did last season. I talked last week about Oscar Clough coming in, cleaning things up inside, but the guy also that is starting to come to the forefront for Purdue is CJ Cox, who's really asserting himself offensively, averaged 14 in the Baha Mar tournament. We don't know yet if this Purdue team is going to be a truly great team. And what I mean by that is you can't just throw around the term great with certain teams in college basketball. It has to be earned. If I go back over the course of history, there are certain teams that obviously I look at and you can say without hesitation, that was a great team. UConn in 2024 was a great team. Baylor in 2021, the team that met Gonzaga, who was undefeated in the national title game, was a great team. Gonzaga, even though it didn't win the national championship, was a great team. Then you look at the Villanova team that won in 2018 with Brunson, with DiVincenzo, with Bridges, with Pascal, with Spellman. That was a great team. But I look at college basketball now, and I see 10 to 12 really good teams. I don't know yet if we have a truly great team in the sport this season. But you know as well as I do, this is only November, at least for another week. And I also want to point out this, because we talked about Purdue's last win, that 30-point thrashing over Texas Tech. Texas Tech defensively has a long ways to go. Texas Tech also, I think it should be pointed out, is moving forward this season without several key players who were a part of last year's run to the Elite Eight where Texas Tech had a major lead late in the game against Florida, who came back and beat Texas Tech and went on to win the national championship. Just think about this when you're evaluating the Red Raiders. And I know I put a lot of stock in the value of retention, as we all should when we're evaluating teams in college basketball. Texas Tech has 2 all Big 12 first-team caliber players in Christian Anderson and JT Toppin. Toppin was the first-team All-American last year. He was obviously the Big 12 player of the year last year. We know that. And Anderson's ready to assume the title of being one of the best players in that conference and one of the best guards in the country. But beyond that, there are still some questions for me, because you have to think a little bit about what Texas Tech lost from last season's team that was inches away from the Final Four. 52-43. 52-43. What was that? That was what Chance McMillan last year shot from the field and shot from the three for Texas Tech. Donovan Atwell and Tyree Bryan are now in position where that is what they are trying to step in for. And the guy who was next to JT Toppin last year up front, Darian Williams, looks like one of the top 5 players in college basketball right now with the work he's doing at NC State. I'm going to get to the Maui Invitational later in the show, but I'm telling you right now, Darian Williams is playing like appointment television. He's scoring. He's rebounding. He's distributing when he gets the opportunity. And here's the thing I love the most about Darian Williams. The game never gets too fast for him. Purdue in a driver's seat to be 13-0 going to 2026. Texas Tech with a lot of work to do. Still has LSU, still has Arkansas, still has Duke on December 20th at Madison Square Garden before we get to 2026. But still a lot of things to continue to work on for the Red Raiders, and a lot of things to get to on this show. Coming up after a short break, what is in store this week in terms of storylines at the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas? Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, want you to like and subscribe on YouTube. Want to get to about 250 likes on this show. And again, I want to give you a reminder, even though we are in a situation where we are doing the show today at 10 a.m. Eastern every single Monday and every single Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season. Holiday is excluded, of course. We are going to be doing a live show here on Inside College Basketball Now. So plan accordingly. If you have work meetings, if you have business lunches, work around our schedule, because we do this show for you. We do the show for the college basketball fan. And in addition to those shows on Monday and Thursday, we are going to be bringing you exclusive interviews throughout the week with the biggest and the best names in our sport. So if you can, make sure Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock are part of your routine. And if you can't get to us Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock, make sure to subscribe on Apple and on Spotify. Okay, the second big thing today on College Basketball Now, of the 3 big things, the Players Era Festival this week in Las Vegas is loaded with different storylines. So I'm going to start with a program that has been to back-to-back Elite Eights, and we really have not seen this season yet in a big spot, and that's Tennessee. Tennessee has become one of the most consistent programs in college basketball under Rick Barnes, and Tennessee has a player that came into the season, Nate Ament, and he was expected to be mentioned with Cam Boozer, with A.J. DeBansa, with Darren Peterson, with Koa Pete as one of the best freshmen and one of the best players in the sport. That hasn't happened yet, but it's not the fault of the young man, Nate Ament, and it's not the fault of Tennessee. Tennessee's schedule has yet to include games of massive ilk. That's changing this week. Tennessee plays today against Rutgers and will play Houston on Tuesday in Las Vegas, which is a rematch of the Elite Eight game that the Cougars won last March. Nate Ament is a player who, when Rick Barnes recruited, he talked to him about what it was like at Texas almost 20 years ago when he recruited and coached Kevin Durant. He's averaging about 18 and 8 at 6'10". He's got an incredible wingspan. He looks the part of the type of player that Norman Rockwell would have painted when you see him. He's long, he's versatile, he's skilled. He is everything you want in a player. And this will also be a pretty good indication of what Tennessee will look like against higher level competition. And if you're thinking about Tennessee and you're thinking about what this team might look like, I will give you the Cliff Notes version. You have Jacoby Gillespie, obviously, the transfer from Maryland, who was a starting point guard on a team last year that went to the Sweet 16. He is an all-SEC caliber point guard. I just talked about Nate Ament. He's a double-figure scorer. He's going to be one of the top picks in the 2026 NBA draft. Not that that matters when we're talking about college basketball, but he is going to be the type of player that will become a must-watch after this week in Las Vegas. And then you have Felix Okpara, defensively protecting the rim, as good as any big man there is in the SEC. And, of course, you have Rick Barnes pulling the strings on the sideline. So this is the week that Tennessee will become more of a national story. Another storyline to keep an eye on is Dylan Darling, who Rick Pitino has shown tremendous confidence in out of the gate at point guard for St. John's. And this St. John's point guard situation continues to be a major, major thing to monitor with the Red Storm. It started out, there was a belief that Rick Pitino in the offseason was going to mold Ian Jackson into a point guard, kind of in the mold of a Kadari Richmond. That hasn't been the path that St. John's has taken. Then Rick Pitino made the comments, obviously, in the preseason that there are no point guards anymore, and St. John's was going to play positionless basketball. We then saw some pockets of Ozziah Sellers getting a run at point guard and Dylan Mitchell getting a run as a point forward. And now Dylan Darling, who played last year at Idaho State, is going to be the guy against Iowa State today, unless the lineup changes between now and tip-off. That looks like he is going to be at the point of attack for St. John's in what will be its second power conference game of the season. Look, Dylan Darling so far this season has looked serviceable to me. 7 points, between 4 and 5 assists. He obviously has a really, really good feel. But the weight class is going to step up this week in Las Vegas. Dylan Darling isn't going up against mid-major players. Remember, he did not play against Alabama. Today, he will go up against Tamin Lipsey, an all Big 12 caliber point guard. Today, he will go up against the team in Iowa State, who is a second weekend team, if the matchups obviously go in their favor in the NCAA tournament. Iowa State, last year under TJ Otzelberger, was a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. Returned Lipsey, returned Nate Heisey, returned Joshua Jefferson, returned Milan Momcilovic. This is as consistent a program as there is in power conference basketball. So for St. John's, who again is playing, in my opinion, in the most anticipated season that we have seen in 25 years, St. John's is going to learn a lot about its point guard situation starting today against Iowa State. And I'm curious to see how the clay is molded on the perimeter for St. John's, because I look at this team and I see two constants, two players whose roles are not in question whatsoever. And it's Bryce Hopkins and it's Zuby Ejiofor. At 4 and 5, you know what you're getting with St. John's. And then on the perimeter, there are a number of players who seem like they are interchangeable from a starting perspective. Some days it's Dylan Darling. Some days it's Jozon Sannon. Some days it's Ozziah Sellers. Some days it's Ian Jackson or Dylan Mitchell. St. John's at 1, 2, and 3 still feels like it's working things out. I think it should be pointed out that what Ian Jackson is doing, and Ian Jackson is without question St. John's most gifted offensive perimeter player, is ridiculous when you think about the amount of minutes he's playing. Ian Jackson going into today's game against Iowa State is averaging 14.5 points in 18.5 minutes. Rick Pitino, Obviously has a lot of confidence in Dylan Darling. He wants to get Osiah Sellers on the floor because of its shooting. Beyond that, it's a little to be determined. And I want to point this out again because I made the comment many times over the offseason, and I still stand by it, that St. John's has the most talented roster in the sport. That doesn't mean at all that St. John's is going to have the best team in the sport or even one of the best teams. But when I see games where St. John's is bringing Ian Jackson, who was a 5-star prospect, Dylan Mitchell, who was a 5-star prospect, off the bench, I don't think there's many teams in college basketball that could do that. And for St. John's now, this week will go a long way in determining what St. John's is capable of from a seeding perspective in the NCAA tournament. Now, I want to point this out because the St. John's fan base, and I know that the St. John's fan base, has been through a lot the last 2.5 decades. Last year, St. John's did not win many non-conference games of significance. Lost the heartbreaker to Baylor, lost a heartbreaker to Georgia as well in the Bahamas, still wound up a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. But if you're a St. John's fan and you dream about a dream season, if you dream about going to a Final Four in Indianapolis, you want to put yourself in the best position always to achieve that. So if you are a St. John's fan, and if you're Rick Pitino and you are determined to take your 4th program to a Final Four, the best way to do it is to be a high seed in the East region, because that means 1st and 2nd round games in Philadelphia. And then if you win those, it means Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games in Washington, D.C. That means St. John's fans would literally just have to get to Penn Station to go on the Amtrak to follow their team in the NCAA tournament. St. John's has got to move the needle this week. Iowa State and Baylor Monday, Tuesday, to be determined coming up on Wednesday, and we'll see how big of a role Dylan Darling plays in that. Want to go to another Big 12 team now, and that's Kansas. And I know I've spent a lot of time talking about Kansas on this show over the last couple of weeks and months, but when I forecasted Kansas as the 6th best team in the Big 12, that forecast was with Darren Peterson. And if you remember the show, after Kansas lost at North Carolina, I talked about how even with Darren Peterson, I was still concerned about Kansas's supporting cast. Kansas's supporting cast played great last week against Duke in a loss in the Champions Classic at Madison Square Garden. But now in a 3-day tournament, that supporting cast is much more vulnerable. Kansas has an improved Notre Dame team on Monday in the Players Era Festival. Carson Tout, the transfer from Northern Arizona, is one of the best rebounders in the country. And also, Notre Dame is improved from a year ago. Almost beat Ohio State a couple weeks on the road, but I'm a big fan of what Micah Shrewsbury has done with his perimeter. Braden Shrewsbury, Marcus Burton, Jalen Harrelson, Logan Imes. Notre Dame is capable today against Kansas. And then Kansas is going to get an improved Syracuse team on Tuesday. And beyond the Players Era Festival, 3 games without Darren Peterson, Kansas's next 3 games after that are all against power conference competition. Next week, UConn comes to Allen Fieldhouse. Then you got Missouri and Kansas City. Dennis Gates looks like he has an NCAA tournament team again. And then you've got Will Wade and NC State in Raleigh on December 13th. The next 6 games for Kansas are all without Darren Peterson. The next 6 games for Kansas are against power conference opponents. And the next 3, according to Bill Self, are without Darren Peterson. Tonight, we have a Final Four caliber game in Las Vegas. We have Alabama and we have Gonzaga. Alabama and Gonzaga are 2 programs that have been to the Final Four in the last half-decade, and Alabama and Gonzaga present a fascinating contrast in styles. Alabama's breakneck pace is unmatched in college basketball. Alabama's guard troika, LeBaron Philon, Latrell Wrightsell, and also Aiden Holloway are in a scenario where they are as difficult to match up on the perimeter as we're going to find in the sport. Reitzel, Holloway, and Philon combined for 63 of Alabama's 103 points when the Crimson Tide beat St. John's at Madison Square Garden on November 8th. And they also, major reason why this team went to the United Center and beat Illinois last week. Alabama is going to want to play this game in the 80s and the 90s. Gonzaga is going to feature its power game of obviously Ike and Huff, one of the best power forward centers combinations in the country. This is a fascinating contrast in styles tonight in Las Vegas between Mark Few and Nate Oates. I'm looking at this game, and I think this is another opportunity, and I'm talking about resumes, for Alabama to continue to separate itself. Alabama has won at St. John's. Alabama went to the state of Illinois and beat Purdue. And Alabama has a chance tonight to get Gonzaga on a neutral court. None of those wins have come in Tuscaloosa, and the only loss that Alabama has is against the number one team in the country in Purdue. Alabama, much like Arizona, in a separation standpoint in terms of putting together the equity needed to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament on Selection Sunday. Also at the Players Era Festival tonight, we are going to have San Diego State play Michigan. San Diego State has as much riding on this week in Las Vegas as any team in the Players Era Festival. That's because the Aztecs, the heavy preseason pick to win the Mountain West, experienced the epitome of brutality last week against Troy. And now there is that much more pressure on San Diego State to move the needle and do some damage in Las Vegas. San Diego State will open the event against Michigan tonight. Tuesday, San Diego State plays Oregon. The third game is to be determined. Remember, after this week, the only other time that San Diego State has a situation where it will play a power conference opponent is against Arizona in Phoenix. That means San Diego State has 4 opportunities to get wins to offset the epitome of brutality last week against Troy. And we have to remember, the state of the Mountain West is not in San Diego State's favor. The Mountain West, time and time again, has been a league that always delivered multiple bids in the NCAA tournament. Right now, I'm looking at 2 teams that have a chance to do it. The Aztecs, because of what they have in front of them in Las Vegas, and Jared Calhoun in Utah State, who looked like a wrecking machine Sunday night against Davidson, 40 points from MJ Collins. Utah State, every single year, is going to be in the mix for an NCAA tournament berth. Jared Calhoun looking to go 2 for 2. The third big thing I want to get to, don't forget this week about the Maui Invitational and the battle for Atlantis. Now, I get that Maui and Atlantis are not what they have been in the past. The fields are significantly weaker, but there is still storylines to monitor. I talked about NC State and Darian Williams earlier in the show. I think this could be a showcase event for Williams to show why he's one of the 5 best players in college basketball. NC State opens against Seton Hall. NC State will then play the winner of Boise State and USC. And then on the other side of the bracket, if Texas can beat Arizona State, I see a clear path to the finals for that winner. Texas is obviously going to be expected to win that game. It's year 1 for the Longhorns under Sean Miller. Texas has only played 1 power conference game so far this season. It was the second day of the season against Duke and Charlotte. Duke won that game. Still a really balanced team. The star power doesn't seem to be there, aside from Dalen Swain, who followed Sean Miller from Xavier to Texas. But when you have a brand as big as Texas, you are in a situation, in my opinion, where you need to take inventory on what the Longhorns can do. Other than Swain, I have yet to see another guy who looks like he can be an all-SEC caliber player. Could be a Texas against either USC or NC State in the title game. Again, the other side of the bracket, NC State, Seton Hall, Boise State against USC. And then in the battle for Atlantis, there's a couple of teams from non-power conferences, and there's a couple of teams, obviously, from power conferences that are looking to add quad one victories. I talked to Phil Martelli Jr. last week from VCU. VCU has come up short in its two big non-conference games, lost to Utah State, who I was just talking about a couple minutes ago, and lost at NC State in a really close game last week. So now when you look at things, and I talked to Phil Martelli Jr. about this, with the state of the Atlantic 10, if VCU does not win multiple games this week at the Battle for Atlantis against the right opponents, VCU will not be in a situation where it can be an at-large team to the NCAA tournament in 2026. It is mathematically impossible given the state of the Atlantic 10. So then you look at the bracket. VCU has to beat a very good American Conference team in South Florida, coached by first-year head coach Brian Hodgson, who's doing a great job, did a great job at Arkansas State. If VCU wins that game, it will likely get Mark Byington and Vanderbilt. Well, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt is an offensive machine. Vanderbilt is averaging, a massive amount of points and has scored 92 or more in all 5 of its games, including one win against the power conference opponent in UCF. Vanderbilt was a surprise team last year, but that's the type of opportunity that Phil Martelli Jr. and VCU need on a neutral court. The other side of the bracket, interesting. Virginia Tech against Colorado State. Neoclis Abdalis, another player who, again, in 3 games in 3 days could shine this week. We saw what he did against Providence a couple of weeks ago at Mohegan Sun. He's got 14 assists and 2 turnovers in the last 2 games. And then you have St. Mary's against Wichita State. Randy Bennett's squad, again, looking like it's going to be a force in the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga. Mikey Lewis, the player that Randy Bennett nicknamed Buckets a couple of years ago when he was recruiting him, looks like a bona fide candidate to be the West Coast Conference Player of the Year this season. Between Mikey Lewis and Paulus Morauskas, who again started his career at Arizona, St. Mary's looks like it's St. Mary's once again. And again, I think if you're looking at this tournament from 30,000 feet, these are the storylines. Can VCU put itself in position to be an at-large team by winning multiple games in the field and winning the right games? Will Vanderbilt's offense be a major focal point nationally, and will it translate to a neutral court setting? And then on the other side, Neoclis Abdalis leads Virginia Tech into the Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas. And what does Mikey Lewis do on a stage like this? 4 teams in this tournament. I'll say this: Virginia Tech, St. Mary's, VCU, and also Vanderbilt could play in the NCAA tournament. And I'd even throw South Florida in there as well, because I think they have enough to get an automatic bid by winning the American Conference tournament. Want to get into the chat. Want to hear from you coming up next. I've been talking long enough. Want you to get, obviously, all your questions in on Feast Week, on Purdue, on anything you've seen in college basketball so far this season. I want you to hit the like and subscribe button. We want to get 250 likes on this show. And I also want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also a reminder, even though we're coming to you today at 10 a.m. Eastern, every Monday and Thursday, with the exception of holidays, we will be on live at 1 o'clock Eastern, along with special exclusive interviews throughout the week with the biggest and the best names in the sport. Your questions and your comments next in the chat. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. Let's get to your questions right now in the live chat, and the chat is bleeding here. Be sure to hit that like button, but we will go. The Purdue fans are fired up. FSU for Life says, yo, my brother and Big East stand up. Solid wins yesterday with Butler, Xavier, and Seton Hall. Creighton this afternoon, 2 p.m. starts. Richard Pitino's done a great job since Xavier lost to Iowa, about a week and change ago. Xavier's played much better basketball. Xavier's played better. Butler with the win over Virginia and with the way it's played so far this season, to me, looks like a team that could be in the conversation with the Georgetowns, with the Villanovas, with the Providences and the Creightons of maybe being the third best team in this conference behind UConn and St. John's. Michael Ajayi, the transfer from Gonzaga, has been a double-double machine, and Finley Bizjack has made a major, major jump. A lot of interesting storylines in the Big East behind UConn and St. John's. Let's keep going right now. Jay Boiler 8686 says, John, Purdue has a favorable schedule. Illinois, Michigan, Michigan State, home games only. That's true. Only 2 games they are not favored, at Indiana and at UCLA. It's interesting you bring up the UCLA piece. UCLA starts out Big Ten play with a slew of road games. And UCLA, I'm checking the dates in my head right now. I believe the date of the UCLA Purdue game at Pauley Pavilion is January 20th. But UCLA plays at Ohio State on the 17th. So UCLA is going to play at Ohio State in Columbus, fly back, get in late on the 17th after being away for a week, and then 2 days later have to play Purdue. So Purdue being in Los Angeles prior to the UCLA game to play USC might help the Boilers be more rested for that game. Keep in mind UCLA's schedule before that game. A lot of people want to talk about Purdue here, and for good reason. Let's see what else we got here. Other questions. TJ98EI says, John, the way Texas Tech showed up really surprised me. Thought they were going to put up more of a fight. Texas Tech has major, major defensive concerns. And look, I will say this until the day I die. Non-conference schedules help obviously get teams rhythm, but non-conference schedules also should only really be evaluated by what you do against opponents that are of a similar caliber. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't read too much into what people are doing in bye games. Wouldn't read too much at all. Texas Tech has played twice this season against power conference caliber opponents. 3 times, excuse me. Texas Tech has played 3 times. But in the games against Purdue and Illinois, the defense was not there. The defense was not there at all. So that, to me, is the concern for Grant McCaslin's team, who, ironically enough, Grant McCaslin was known at North Texas as being this defensive-minded coach. And now, since obviously he's gotten to a job where he can get better players, he's focusing more on guys who can put the ball in the basket. But Texas Tech will not go near where it was last season unless it starts guarding better. Jay Boiler 8686 says, Clough might be the steal of the portal. I hoped he was good, but now I think he's way better than I expected. Same with Meyer. They're 2 straight-up ballers. Well, I'll say this. 2 years ago, when Purdue went all the way to the national title game and lost to UConn, Matt Painter went and got a mid-major transfer, Lance Jones from Southern Illinois, who kind of shored up the perimeter defense. And now you're looking at Oscar Clough, another mid-major transfer, filling a void at a different position. Purdue is so much better on the defensive glass and defensively on the interior than it was last season, because last season you had Trey Kaufman-Renn and you had Cam Heide. And now you're starting to see a little bit the effect it's having on Trey Kaufman-Renn and how much better of a rebounder he is at the 4 versus the 5. Let's keep going here. Let's keep going here. Some metrics questions right now. Still, everybody wants to talk about Purdue. Rowan says, John, what do you think about the ranked matchup Tuesday? It's actually Thursday on Thanksgiving with Michigan State and UNC. Well, I'll say this. North Carolina is still playing without Seth Trimble, which is obviously a major, major loss for the Tar Heels. But in his absence, Luka Bogovac has played really good basketball offensively. So this is another opportunity here for North Carolina to make a major statement, and it's another opportunity for Caleb Wilson to measure himself against the best in the sport. Jackson Kohler is playing great basketball for Michigan State right now. all Big Ten first-team caliber basketball. It's another opportunity and another showcase, not just for North Carolina, but for Caleb Wilson, who, again, has proven already that he's not just one of the best freshmen, he's one of the best players in college basketball. Hunter Johnson, this will be the last question we get to. How do we feel about Creighton versus Baylor today? I'm officially concerned about Creighton, and I was concerned before the season when Creighton was set to begin for the first time in 6 years of a season without Ryan Kalkbrenner. I watched the opener against South Dakota, and I watched how South Dakota felt like every single possession just went to the front of the rim to try and test Creighton's interior defense. And then I started to see Creighton go on the road against Gonzaga, and the game wasn't close. Then all of a sudden, Jackson McAndrew is lost for the season, the starting four-man with a foot injury. I think Creighton, without question, is more vulnerable than it was and that it's been for a long, long time, especially defensively. And I'm going to give you a name on a player to keep in mind in this game, and that's Cameron Carr of Baylor. And I know there's a lot of great players in the Big 12 this season. We've got so many guys who are going to be able to put up big numbers. Obviously, DeBansa and Saunders at BYU. Obviously, Kingston Flemings has done great things at Houston. Obviously, Darren Peterson's going to do it at Kansas. Obviously, Iowa State's got great players, and so does Arizona. Cam Carr is going to be in play to lead the Big 12 in scoring this year for Baylor. And I think he is another player this week at the Players Era Festival that could make a major, major statement because of the showcase opportunity. Back-to-back Big East opponents for Baylor on Monday and Tuesday. Creighton today, St. John's on Tuesday. Let's get to three good nuggets here before we get out of here. The only thing to fear is Fears himself. I'm talking about Jeremy Fears at Michigan State. He, so far this season, has 52 assists and 10 turnovers. To me, he's the best table-setting point guard in the country. Nugget number two, the Butler may do it again, and I'm talking about Butler. We touched on it in the chat. Butler has only lost one game this year. It was a road game at SMU where Butler was in the game until the end. Butler, to me, again, looks like it is its best rendition that we have seen under Thad Matta since Matta came back to take over in 2022. Nugget number three, another player that's under the radar, and we'll see him on CBS Sports Network Tuesday night when Ole Miss takes on Iowa. Ilias Kamardine. It's Ilias, excuse me. Ilias Kamardine for Ole Miss. Ilias Kamardine is a player internationally that came over to play for Chris Beard at Ole Miss. Chris Beard raved about him during the offseason. He has looked the part for Ole Miss already, shooting the basketball at a high clip, 15 points, 5 assists a game. Ole Miss has yet to play, in my opinion, a game that will measure itself like the one against Iowa. Iowa's only big game so far is at home against Xavier. This is one of the more under-the-radar games that we will see during Feast Week. Ole Miss against Iowa, two great coaches, Chris Beard, Ben McCollum. But Ilias Kamardine is a name to watch. He could explode this week. What games are there to watch this week? All of them. If you're a college basketball fan, want to make sure we give a plug to the game Thursday night on CBS. Arkansas against Duke in prime time. I'll be there on the call with Ian Eagle and Bill Raftery. And again, want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also a reminder, we need an army with us here on Inside College Basketball now. And we're bringing live shows to you every Monday and every Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern, holidays excluded, throughout the college basketball season. Stay tuned throughout the week and the weeks to come for more. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.